Daniel parked his car in front of his wife Clara's old house. The afternoon sun lit up the weathered facades, and the light wind rustled the leaves on the surrounding trees. The house, a red brick building with dusty windows, seemed almost untouched by time. To Daniel, it was a symbol of the stability he had lost. With a sigh, he got out of the car and walked up to the front door, feeling the weight of sadness on his shoulders. The key turned in the lock with a familiar click. The smell of dust and old wood filled the room as he entered. The house was silent, interrupted only by the sound of Daniel's own footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. He began to sort through the boxes that were scattered around the living room. There was a sense of nostalgia mixed with the emptiness of loss. The house was still full of memories, from the furniture Clara had loved to the little details that had made the place special. Daniel tried not to think too much, focusing only on the task at hand, organizing what was left of Clara's life. As he moved a stack of boxes to the attic, his eyes fell on an old box hidden in a corner. The box was made of dark wood, with rusty locks and a thick layer of dust. Curious, Daniel decided to open the box before continuing with his work. Inside the box, he found a series of yellowed letters and other personal items. The letters were neatly arranged in an envelope with his name handwritten on it. Daniel hesitated for a moment, the weight of the envelope seeming to reflect the weight of the memories he was about to relive. Finally, he decided to open the first letter. Clara's writing was unmistakable, each word brimming with emotion. The letter seemed to be a kind of intimate diary, revealing feelings and thoughts that Daniel had never known. The first letter mentioned something vague about a secret that Clara had kept, and this made Daniel uneasy. The tone of the letter was melancholic, as if Clara was trying to say goodbye to something very important, something that he did not yet fully understand. The first letter Daniel read was an unsettling prelude to what was to come. Clara began with an expression of love, but soon the tone shifted to something darker. She spoke of a sense of unease and a mysterious family figure who had pressed her in moments of vulnerability. Daniel found himself caught between the pain of loss and the growing curiosity about what exactly Clara was hiding. Over the next few days, Daniel devoted his afternoons to reading the letters. Each one felt like a piece of an emotional puzzle, revealing more about Clara's fears and anxieties. She described unsettling encounters with this shadowy figure and spoke of a feeling of constant surveillance. The palpable fear in her words was almost visible, and Daniel could not ignore the weight of these revelations. With each new letter, Daniel delved deeper into the dark world Clara had faced. In one letter, Clara revealed a disturbing detail. A family member had threatened to expose secrets that could destroy everything she and Daniel had built together. Clara wrote in a tone of despair, apologizing for not having shared this part of her life sooner. The feeling of betrayal and helplessness that Daniel felt was intense. He knew that Clara had her secrets, but he had never imagined that she was dealing with something so terrifying. He tried to understand why Clara had not confided in him, and the weight of this doubt was almost unbearable. In addition to the letters, Daniel found other items in the box: old photos, notes, and small mementos that seemed to carry the weight of Clara's memories. Each item seemed to tell a part of the story that he did not yet fully understand. The house was full of these memories, and Daniel felt that he was beginning to understand a little more about Clara's life, even if it made him increasingly restless. At night, Daniel tried to rest, but thoughts about Clara's letters and secrets would not leave him alone. The shadows in the house seemed to come to life, and the silence was interrupted by inexplicable sounds that echoed through the hallways. The feeling of being watched was constant, and Daniel began to wonder if he was just imagining things, or if there was something truly disturbing about the house. As the days passed, the presence of something disturbing in Daniel's house became more evident. He began to notice unexplained changes in his surroundings. Objects that were in one place during the day would appear in another at night. The feeling of being watched intensified, and the silence of the house seemed to carry an almost palpable tension. One particularly quiet night, Daniel was in the living room reading one of the remaining letters. Suddenly, he heard a faint cracking sound coming from upstairs. The sound was barely audible, but it was enough to make him get up and check. Climbing the stairs, he found the hallway dark, with no apparent explanation for the noise. Shadows seemed to move strangely on the walls, and Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Each night, the behavior of objects in the house became more erratic. Books fell from shelves for no apparent reason, doors opened and closed on their own, and an unexplained feeling of cold spread through the rooms. One night, Daniel woke to the sound of heavy footsteps approaching his room. He hurriedly got up, but found no one there. The disturbing events were beginning to affect his sanity. Daniel tried to rationalize what was happening, attributing the phenomena to his mind being overwhelmed by grief and stress. However, the feeling of unease would not go away. He began to doubt whether it was all a figment of his imagination, or whether there really was something supernatural going on in the house. In search of answers, Daniel revisited Clara's letters, trying to find any clues as to what could be causing these events. With each reading, the fear and sense of urgency in Clara's words seemed to come to life. Clara had mentioned a presence that seemed to follow her, an entity she could not explain. This presence now seemed to be acting directly on Daniel. The feeling of being watched turned into an almost paralyzing fear. Daniel found himself constantly checking the dark corners of the house, trying to ignore the unsettling sensations he could not explain. The accumulated tension was beginning to affect his well-being, and the house, which had once been a refuge, was turning into a place of terror. The constant fear and unexplained events began to consume Daniel. He knew he needed to understand what was happening in the house and, desperate for answers, decided to investigate further. He revisited Clara's letters, looking for any clues that could explain the origin of the disturbing presence. It was then that he found the last letter, hidden in a separate envelope from the others. Clara's writing was particularly shaky, and the tone was one of profound sadness. Clara began the letter by apologizing for not having revealed everything to Daniel before she died. She explained that she was dealing with a devastating family secret and that she had been threatened by a family member with malicious intent. In the letter, Clara revealed that this family member, a distant uncle named Edward, had tried to manipulate her life and actions in order to destroy her happiness. Edward knew secrets that could ruin Clara and Daniel's lives, and his influence seemed to have an almost supernatural presence. Clara mentioned feeling Edward's influence on her life, even when he was not physically present. The contents of the letter were shocking and revealing. Daniel now understood that Clara was fighting a force far greater than he had imagined. Edward had been dead for years, but his influence persisted, and Clara had feared for his safety until the very end. Determined to face the truth, Daniel began investigating Edward. He discovered that Edward had been a very controversial figure, and that his last years were marked by erratic and threatening behavior. There were rumors about his occult practices and how he tried to control the lives of those around him. Daniel realized that the disturbing experiences in the house were connected to Edward's legacy. Clara's letters and recent discoveries began to make sense. The presence he felt in the house was a manifestation of the control and negative influence that Edward still exerted, even after his death. Armed with this knowledge, Daniel prepared to confront the source of the evil that had haunted Clara and now tormented him. With the knowledge of Edward and his dark legacy, Daniel decided to directly confront the disturbing presence in the house. He armed himself with all the information he had uncovered from the letters and from his investigations, determined to confront the evil that had haunted Clara and now tormented him. One cold, still night, Daniel decided to do a spiritual cleansing of the house. He gathered all the items he had found in Clara's box and spread them across the living room floor, as if forming a circle of protection. He lit candles and incense, trying to create an environment that would help him connect with the world beyond. As he prepared himself, the feeling of being watched intensified. The shadows in the house seemed to move more agitatedly, and the unexplained sounds became more frequent. Daniel felt a chill as the winds began to blow violently through the windows, causing the candles to flicker and the smell of incense to spread throughout the room. As Daniel began to speak aloud, summoning any force that could help him confront Edward, he heard a familiar sound. The heavy footsteps they had heard earlier. Edward's presence seemed to materialize in the form of a distorted shadow, advancing towards Daniel with a threatening intent. The shadow, shrouded in an aura of coldness and anger, began to interact with the surroundings. The candles went out one by one, and the air became almost unbearably cold. Daniel felt a growing pressure in his chest and a whispering voice that seemed to be trying to destabilize him emotionally. He remembered Clara's words and tried to keep himself steady. With renewed determination, Daniel continued his ritual, repeating words of protection and calling upon the strength of Clara's good intentions and love. The presence began to retreat, but not without resistance. The shadows seemed to struggle against its strength, and the room became a battleground between light and darkness. Finally, with a guttural scream and a deafening crash, the shadow dissipated, and the room fell silent again. Daniel fell to his knees, exhausted but relieved. Edward's presence had been temporarily neutralized, and the oppressive feeling that had dominated the house seemed to have lessened. Yet even after the battle, the house was scarred by the experience. Daniel knew that the struggle against Edward's legacy was not completely resolved, but he had made important progress. He felt that, in some way, he had honored Clara's memory and faced the horrors that had haunted their lives. After the battle against Edward's presence, Daniel felt profound exhaustion, but also a sense of relief. The house was quiet, the atmosphere calmer than it had been in weeks. The feeling of being watched had lessened, and the weight of oppression seemed to have lifted, though not completely. In the days that followed, Daniel devoted himself to transforming the house into a memorial for Clara. He knew he could not change the past, but he could honor her memory in a way that brought some peace. He set up a space in the living room, decorating it with the photos and personal items he found in the box. He created a small altar with candles and flowers where he could sit and reflect on Clara and all she had endured. The house, which had once been filled with an ominous presence, began to feel like a more welcoming place. Daniel made a point of preserving Clara's memories with care, keeping the space as comfortable as possible. He spent time in the new space, talking to Clara as if she were still there, sharing his thoughts and feelings. Although he knew the real Clara was no longer present, the ritual of remembrance was a way for him to cope with his grief and mourning. Clara's letters, which had been the starting point for all his torment, were now a source of comfort. Daniel read and reread her words, not only to remind himself of the secrets and fears she had faced, but also to find deeper meaning in his experiences. He learned that Clara's love was not just about the happy times, but also about facing adversity with courage. Over time, Daniel began to accept that the pain and trauma of his experience would not completely disappear, but he found a way to live with them. The house, now transformed into a tribute to Clara, served as a constant reminder of her love and struggle. He knew that Edward's influence might still be present on some level, but the main battle had been won. The final chapter of his journey was marked by a new beginning. Daniel was determined to move forward, taking with him the lessons he had learned and the memories that were now part of his life. He found new purpose in turning his pain into something positive, and the house became a symbol of resilience and love.